Welcome to Good Life. I'm Dean Wilson. I'm so glad you're with us. Wherever you are, you can always find us at goodlifetelevision.org. All the interviews are there. A lot of great power clips are there. You can find us on all the social media platforms. It's been so neat to see so many of you finding us and joining us. We're talking about the good stuff. We're talking about things that encourage, great stories, great work, great nonprofits like we have today, overcomers, entrepreneurs, public servants. It's been a great road we've been on with these wonderful guests. So we're so glad you're with us. And I'm really excited about my guest today. Jan Campbell is with me. Jan's the Executive Director of Domestic Violence Solutions here in Santa Barbara, where we are. Welcome.
Thank you, and thank you for having me.
Yeah,
really
thank you for
appreciate
being
it.
here. Talk a little bit about your background. You're a gaucho.
Yes, I'm a gaucho through and through. I grew up in the San Fernando Valley and came up to go to school at UCSB. Gosh, when dinosaurs were roaming the earth. And then I've had a variety of careers. I was an English major, so I love to write and I love to read. I've done everything from being a parking control marker at the Santa Barbara Police Department to working for a number of nonprofits here in Santa Barbara County, which is really where my heart is. Yeah. So I've worked for the Ben Page Youth Center, Heal the Ocean, long stint with the Santa Barbara Foundation, our local community foundation, and started with domestic violence early in 2018,
Okay.
and have continued on since then.
So you kind of got into philanthropy, into nonprofit work, and that kind of captured your attention.
Yeah, I've always been very community oriented. I've loved Santa Barbara because it's a small town. It's sort of a big town in a small area, I guess would be a better way to say it. But I raised both my kids here. My husband is a longtime Santa Barbara resident. You know, we participated in all their sports and their school and all of that kind of, things that you guys talk about, stuff outside of yourself. And so that is always very rewarding. I also had a long career with Bartlett, Pringle & Wolf, which is a public accounting firm, and got some really great management experience there. But my heart really is in the social sector.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Well, I was fascinated to read about domestic violence solutions. I think, and I want to talk kind of all about it.
Okay.
It seems like the domestic violence is one of those things that's kind of unseen in a community.
Yes.
You don't know what's going on, but it is, and it needs to be addressed. So talk about that, kind of this issue.
So I'm glad you raised that issue right off the bat. And actually, October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month.
Oh, good.
And the national theme is Everyone Knows Someone. And so domestic violence, or intimate partner violence as we also call it, is underreported. Mm-hmm. It's very shameful. Up until the 1970s, it was considered a family matter, and so people didn't get involved. Our shelter is the second oldest in California.
Wow.
Our organization, and it's the roots of domestic violence. Sometimes it's intergenerational. So if you grow up in a home where violence is the answer to everything, then that's what you take with you. Yeah. So it's really important to try to get into younger generations with preventative measures. But the sad part is there are so many people that are suffering through this that don't know where to go for help, think it's going to change, are financially strapped, they have nowhere to go. So we have programs that address all of those. But you're 100% right. It's a very hidden epidemic. The CDC calls it one of the top epidemics in the country.
Really?
So, yeah.
So it's much more prevalent than we would think.
Without question. Yeah, and it bleeds obviously into mental, physical health, the cost to law enforcement. It's the number one call that law enforcement gets. Lost days of work. It has a huge economic impact on the community as well. So yeah.
So you were saying, in terms of preventative stuff. So if a young person is raised in a home where this is happening and it looks like normal, You're saying there's kind of intervention type work that's being done?
Yes. So there's a number of, one of the great things I love about Santa Barbara County is that the safety net of the social sector is very strong. So there
Right.
are a number of organizations that work together to address family issues, where be they, food insecurity, mental health, child abuse. It runs the gamut. So what we participate in are a number of collaboratives that work to support the family, and particularly children, so that they realize this is not a normal way of life. And so, I mean, there are horrendous statistics about children that grow up in homes where there is a lot of domestic violence tend to either become abusers themselves or be abused. It's hard to break out of the cycle. Domestic violence is a cycle of power and control. And so that sort of bleeds over into everything. And
Wow.
so when people think that the normal is throwing, a television out the window because they're upset, they don't know there are other ways. So we work in these collaboratives to try to talk about protective factors for children, how to be a good parent. We all know, those of us that are parents, that's not the only job you can ever quit, and it can be very challenging.
Yes.
So, yeah.
Wow. So let's talk about the typical thing that happens. So, because I read you have an emergency shelter services, you had that part of,
Right.
you have a domestic violence emergency response team, and then you have the support groups.
Right.
So talk about kind of the work of domestic violence solutions in kind of all of its aspects.
So we like to say that that in a very succinct sentence that we provide safety, shelter, and support. So let's just talk about safety for a second. So we respond to all law enforcement calls. There's 9 law enforcement agencies in Santa Barbara County, and we are a county-wide organization. So oftentimes law enforcement will call us in if they go to a domestic violence call and they ascertain, or the person that is being abused needs to leave because of safety issues, primarily violence, physical violence. So at that point, we take them into our emergency shelter. So we have 2 emergency shelters, one in Santa Barbara and one in Santa Maria. And they both are. The Santa Maria shelter is an apartment complex, which actually worked out really well for us during COVID, because the Santa Barbara facility is more like a dorm environment. So we have a total of 104 shelter beds.
Wow.
We serve all genders. Primarily, our clients are young, between the ages of 20 and 35. Most of them have children. Oftentimes, we serve more children than we do adults, because if a person, most likely a woman, is fleeing, the other than financial, the number one kind of holdback is children.
Yeah.
So that's the safety issue. Our shelters are confidential. Once the clients get into our shelter, we immediately set up a case management system where the client meets with the client advocate, kind of ascertains what it is they really need. Oftentimes it's legal assistance for restraining orders, custody issues. When domestic violence victims are considered homeless by HUD Category 4. So oftentimes people come into our shelter with just the clothes they have on their back and their kids. So we provide emergency food, clothing, essential, necessities, toiletries and whatnot. And so the case manager starts working with, clients can stay in our shelters for up to 60 days. So we use that period of time to get them the resources. Again, I mentioned the safety net. What do they need? Yeah. And how can we help facilitate that? Because we're only one agency in this whole group. But we have really strong counseling programs. So we have we have 2 clinicians. We do a lot of community work. Again, prior to the pandemic, we worked primarily in shelter. But because that's not always an option, we did much more outreach to the community. So we've got education-only sessions. So it's very interesting. I get calls and people come into the admin office. They don't know they're in a domestic violence relationship. They're like, I think I might be abused, but I'm not sure, because a lot of DV is not physical. It's emotional, psychological, financial, and technological. Tracking, stalking, all that stuff. So the advocates, to go back to the shelter and the support, so they provide, we work in what we call a trauma-informed, client-centered approach. There's a lot of blame, there's a lot of victim blaming that goes on. You know, the classic thing is, well, why didn't you just leave? It's like, well, there's so many telescoping reasons why people don't leave. Right. So we work to try to figure out, first of all, we have a big housing program. So we own a 15 unit apartment building in Santa Barbara, only for, it's Section 8, so it's only for DV survivors. So we have 15 families in there that have kind of gone all the way through our program. Now they have a beautiful place to live. We continue to provide supportive services, because again, it's really hard when you're in a DV relationship not to think he or she is going to change. You know, I'm going to give him one more chance. If she would only listen to me, I'll be able to do this. The statistics, and I'm not sure where they came from, it's pretty standard in the DV world. It takes about 7 times for people to realize, to leave and come back. A lot of times it's financial, you know, poverty, inequity, all bleeds into it.
They don't know you exist, maybe.
Well, they might come into our shelter multiple times and leave and then come back. So we try to get people stabilized in housing. We have a really amazing program that we call Life and Job Skills, and this is part of your good news. The woman that does this, who's a social worker, has helped so many people find jobs, buff out their resumes, go back to school, learn some type of basic financial literacy. Oftentimes people come into our shelter, they've never handled money. Right. They've been, you know, the abuser has always done, it's a control factor. So we try to provide a co-created plan with the client so that they can move into a life that's free from abuse. So that's really, really what we do primarily. And then we answer, gosh, I think in our last fiscal year, we handled almost 5,000 emergency calls to our crisis and information line. And clients or individuals may not come into our shelter, but they may just want to know what are their options, what can they do. We work really closely with a number of local agencies. Food Bank is amazing. Legal Aid Foundation is great. Transition House, one of my favorite organizations.
So you refer?
We refer. We all work together. The executive directors all get together. We work with the other homeless agencies, Good Samaritan up in North County, Path here. What's been sad is since the pandemic, we've seen a dramatic increase, first of all, in the lethality. There's much more violence. There's violence everywhere. So there's much more of that. And then there's been a huge decline in mental health. I mean, we all know how we felt on and off during the pandemic. It's hard to kind of stay motivated and, you know, and not be anxious. So people that are in trauma already, and then layering, maybe they've lost their job, you know, they're home with kids, they're home with their abuser, because safe at home isn't always safe at home for domestic violence victims. So we've really boosted our counseling program, our outreach. Every year we go into the high schools. This year will be a in person. We did it obviously via Zoom to talk about teen dating violence, because that is sort of the first step into an adult abusive relationship.
Wow, what a
and
great
teenagers
idea.
are, you know, it's interesting because it's approximately 50-50 boys abusing girls, girls abusing boys.
Is it really?
You would not think that. I mean, I have 2 daughters, so I can tell you girls are not the saints that they are always made out to be. Right. And there's a lot of technological abuse, constant texting, controlling, stalking, you know, with all of the websites and social media. Really, it's very difficult for teenagers.
Wow.
And it's very easy to sort of slip into that kind of relationship. I've had parents and their children come into our administrative office to talk about, you know, a mom or dad has brought in their teenager, and it breaks my heart because I can just see the tension between the two, and the teenager may not want to admit kind of what's going on, or they certainly don't want their parents to know. So
Right.
we work with those groups, and we work with a number of other, there's a great organization in town called What is Love, and that's run by Christy Stillwell, and she actually worked for domestic violence, but she has a very robust program of going into all the high schools and teaching healthy dating. What does it mean to say no and mean no, and what does it mean to set boundaries, and who can you trust, and what do you do if your friends say, hey, I'm in this horrible relationship, what do you tell your friends? So it's really, again, it's a great network of social service agencies and people that really are very committed to a crisis intervention type program to get people healthy, to keep people safe, and live the kind of life that we all want to live.
Yeah.
So
I didn't think about that in terms of the technology of the day, of that being a way in which people can be abused.
Oh, it's the worst. And we just had an incident where we had to transfer a client in between our shelters because it turned out that there was I'm not sure if it's called a low jack. I'm not sure but it's a tracking device that was put on the client's car. And so we paid to have the car completely, debugged, really James Bond, so that because the client had to work. And so everywhere she went, the abuser knew where she was. So, and then just there's the phone technology, there's all the tracking, and controlling people through just constant texting and where are you,
Right.
So it's, I was telling my husband the other day, sometimes I'm so grateful for technology, and sometimes it's like, hey, it would have been better just to pick up one of those rotary phones. Now I'm dating myself.
Right. Right.
I used to love them. Ding, 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 ding. Yeah. So.
Right. Yeah. There's definitely. We see the plus sides of technology, but I think sometimes we don't realize the downsides.
Well, you're open to everything.
Yeah.
There really is no privacy. So,
Right.
And that's very, very problematic for domestic violence victims because confidentiality, privacy, we're very careful about, how we categorize our clients. We get a lot of our funding from public sources. So the state of California, Housing and Urban Development for our housing programs. And so we have to report. The government is, as I tell people, I thought dealing with domestic violence was difficult, but it's not as difficult as dealing with the government reporting. It's very onerous.
I understand that.
So, but we track all kinds of data, from demographic data to when people enter the shelter, when they exit the shelter. We follow up with them months later to find out, because sometimes people will just self-exit. They're like, hey, I got it together. Unfortunately, oftentimes they're going back to the abuser, but we try to check in to kind of keep our stats, clean. Like, where did they go? Do they still need our services? We offer non-residential services as well, so you don't have to come into the shelter to receive the services that we offer, including assistance with housing. Because we all know that Santa Barbara County is it's a very expensive place to live. The rents are high. Oftentimes we're dealing with people that are, frontline workers. In North County, a lot of agricultural workers. So they don't have the kind of credit worthiness or wherewithal to secure and pay for a living situation themselves. So we have gotten quite a bit of funding to help with move-in costs, rent subsidies, that type of thing. That's been a really successful program for us.
Oh.
And it's so great to see how excited people are. You want good news, to see how excited they get when they're in their own unit that they can control, that they're not afraid of. It's so safe, and it's just it's that and the reuniting with the pets. So I have to tell you this because you'll love this story. Your listeners will love this. So oftentimes, abusers use manipulation and control and isolation to control the person that's being abused, and oftentimes it's a pet that the owner, the client, might be a cat or dog, birds, we've had all kinds. They won't leave because the abuser won't let them have their pet. Now, I have a dog and I know how horrible that would be. So we have a really cool arrangement with an organization called Care for Paws, which is a fabulous organization. They do a number of things, very low cost vet service, spaying and neutering, all that. But what they do with us is they will take, we don't allow pets in our shelters for a number of reasons unless it's a service animal. So they'll take the pet and foster them until the client finds a place to live or, gets in a more secure environment. And so to watch people be reunited with their pets is just the best.
That's great.
Wow. Who doesn't, again, it's people love their dogs and cats, and so it's part of the healing process.
Yeah.
So that's, it's very rewarding to watch people, making a new life for themselves, finding a place to live, being reunited with their pet, maybe getting a much better job. We had one client that came into our emergency shelter with 3 kids about 2 years ago, and she was just devastated. Just was a really bad situation, and we worked with her. We transferred her. We found a transitional living apartment for her and her children, and she was there for about 18 months. And then when we were converting our facility to permanent housing, she ended up moving in with her children. She's gotten a great job. She's going back to college to get her. Now she's going to be to get her MFCC, her therapy degree. Her kids are doing great.
Wow.
And so to see people, humans are so resilient. Again, you just think of the news in the world and it's very depressing. But I see people that have overcome things and you just think to yourself, how could they have possibly done that? But there's just something that people want to succeed. They want to, they especially people with kids, if that's, if they're tuned into that, they want a better life. They don't want to live that kind of life. So it's very, even though this is a hard job, it can be very rewarding.
Yeah, I bet.
Yeah.
So safety, shelter, support.
Yep.
That's what, it is a brave decision, isn't it, that these folks have to make. Talk about bravery.
You're exactly right.
But we want to encourage people, because if they're watching and you're in this kind of a situation, you think, I think the feeling I'm getting from you is they're in this situation, and then if they make the choice to do this, if they make the choice to walk out, it's on them.
Yes.
The whole thing blown up, it's on them.
Yep.
So, like having to push through that and say, you know what, this is what I'm doing, and to trust that this is the best. This is going to be really rough to do. The bravest decision I've ever had to make, but once I do it, there's going to be a life of freedom and safety. But it requires tremendous bravery.
It's like, what is that saying? The longest journey begins with a single step.
Yeah,
and that's really what it is. It's like you have to either be so frightened or just so committed that there is a better life out there. And that's what we try to do when we do community outreach, is let people know. And they can sort of slide into it, if they want to do some, we do online telehealth therapy sessions, if they want to understand kind of the role they're in and what the options are, we do that too. You don't have to just run out and come to the shelter. So a lot of people take a slower route. Sometimes we'll talk to people 4 or 5 times before they make the decision to, to leave. It's hard. It's hard to leave. Even it's sort of the devil that you know versus the devil that you don't know.
That's right.
And that's what we saw during COVID. The first 8 weeks of COVID, completely shut down. We never shut down, but very few calls. Law enforcement wasn't getting any calls. People were terrified. And again, isolation and manipulation are 2 of the biggest tools that abusers use. Like, you can't leave because you're going to go out there and you're going to die, or you're going to, they're not safe, or, it's whatever the excuses were. That was pretty eye-opening.
How did people find you online? Just Domestic Violence Solutions is our website?
Yeah, so our website is dvsolutions.org.
Okay.
And I want to give I want to provide our crisis line number. It's
Yes.
24-hour crisis and information line.
Please.
So it's area code 805-964-5245.
So that's the crisis line, dvsolutions.org
.org is our website.
is the website.
And then,
if you're in a situation, if you know of someone, I'd encourage you to make the brave choice, the difficult, brave choice. But this organization is with you. What a wonderful thing. Thanks
you.
for what you do.
Oh, you're welcome.
Yeah,
It's a joy.
Thanks.
And I have the best staff on the planet.
Oh, wonderful. That makes it good.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
And thank you. We'll see you next time.